We all have this image, right? Short-term mission trips, good intentions, helping hands, maybe changing the world in a week or two. But what happens when that picture hits the reality of, say, an overflowing septic tank?
Yeah, that's pretty much the gritty starting point for our deep dive today. We're looking into these personal, kind of unfiltered notes from someone who spent a fair bit of time on very short-term missions.
Right. Forget the glossy brochure version.
Exactly. This is more about the unexpected, the messy stuff, the challenges you don't always hear about.
Okay, so we're digging into these firsthand accounts. What's the mission here? What are we trying to pull out of this?
We really want to unpack the experiences and understand the, let's say, the true costs and complexities, what really goes into these trips beyond just showing up.
Makes sense. So jumping into the notes, what's one of the first things that jumps out?
Well, the sheer unpredictability, especially like the physical environment. It's one thing to plan to build something.
And quite another to be dealing with raw sewage.
Yeah.
Tell me about that bowel feed situation.
Right. So this house, one of the few with a septic system, mind you, it overflows, and suddenly the mission isn't what was planned.
It's emergency plumbing with whatever you can find, seashells and mops.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
It's a stark contrast to, the fundraising pitch back home. It immediately highlights this need for just adapting on the fly.
Absolutely. And that theme seems to carry over into other areas, like the donated medical equipment. You'd think that would be straightforward.
Oh, you would think. But the notes, they paint a very different picture, like 12 suction machines arriving. Great, right?
Yeah, sounds useful.
Except not a single one worked. They were ancient, the companies didn't exist anymore, basically junk.
Wow. So good intentions, but completely unusable donations.
Exactly. It raises this big question about what effective aid actually looks like. It's not just sending stuff.
Right. Like the wasp nest inside an ECG machine. It's almost funny if it weren't so frustrating.
It really underscores the pointlessness of sending broken or unmaintainable equipment.
And some of the other donations. A sack of metal hangers. A phone book for Richland, Ohio. Seriously.
It does make you wonder, doesn't it? What's the thought process? Like the author asks, why not send your best, not just the stuff you don't want anymore?
The contrast with the Walmart donation new clothes really hits that home, providing what's actually needed and usable.
Precisely. It's about thoughtful support, not just offloading surplus.
So beyond the big equipment fails, even just daily life sounds like it had constant physical hurdles, power outages.
Frequent power outages.
Yeah.
And things we take totally for granted, like the author mentions appreciating a single M&M. It really shifts your perspective.
Yeah, you can imagine. It shows the resource limits they're working with constantly.
And the ingenuity it sparks, like needing to remove a cast but having no cast cutter.
What did they do?
Use tin snips. You just make do with what you have. Incredible resourcefulness.
Okay, so this pattern of unexpected physical stuff, constant adaptation. It sounds intense. Now, the notes also get into healthcare in these settings. That feels like even higher stakes.
It definitely is. One story that really stood out was a woman who developed Cushing's syndrome.
Okay. And how did that happen?
From using over-the-counter prednisone. Long-term, unsupervised. It shows the danger of having drugs available without the medical guidance.
Wow. So an easy solution ends up causing a much bigger problem down the line. That highlights a huge gap in healthcare understanding or access.
A critical gap.
Yeah.
And then you see the flip side, the lack of resources we rely on, like diagnosing a goiter.
Yeah.
Back home, you'd run thyroid tests, right?
Yeah.
TSH, T4, all that. There, nothing. They had to rely purely on, looking at the patient, clinical experience, and prayer, as the notes mentioned.
That's a huge difference, relying on judgment and faith when the tech isn't there.
It really underscores the limitations. But
Mhm.
then you also get these incredibly human moments.
Like the patient hug.
Exactly. After an exam, even without fancy tests, the patient just gives this heartfelt hug. It's a reminder, isn't it? That presence, that care, it matters immensely, regardless of the technology.
That's a powerful point. It's not always about the equipment. But the notes do mention some pretty serious trauma, too. A machete incident in a schoolyard.
Yeah, that's jarring. The notes mention machetes being used for, basic schoolyard maintenance, different world, different tools, different dangers.
And that leads into the story of the man with the severed Achilles tendon.
Right, from a machete fight. And again, that resourcefulness comes in needing the tin snips to get his improvised cast off later. It shows the kind of serious injuries they're dealing with, often with very basic tools.
And then there's Enrico, his story about the torn meniscus.
Yeah.
That felt really significant.
It really did, because for him, not being able to work wasn't just an inconvenience. It meant no food, no income, Zero safety net.
It's that brutal link between health and basic survival.
And the author notes, almost everyone here is an Enrico. That's the key takeaway. Illness or injury isn't just a medical problem. It's an immediate economic catastrophe for so many.
Such a precarious existence. Okay, and then briefly, malaria diagnosis seems straightforward, but leishmaniasis was a newer concern.
Yeah, it shows how the health challenges evolve too. You get a handle on one thing, like malaria testing, and then something else starts emerging.
Okay, let's shift gears a bit. The notes also give these little glimpses into cultural differences, simple things like eating out.
Ah, yes. Maribel's. The finest restaurant in Balfate.
But served.
Fried chicken. Always fried chicken. Maybe fried fish, if you were lucky. It's a fun anecdote, but it speaks to adapting to local norms, right? You eat what's available.
Leave your expectations at the door. But there are more profound cultural moments, too, like the elderly woman traveling for hours.
Hours and hours, yeah. Just to see a visiting heart specialist, it shows how much they value that care, how far they'll go, and how much they rely on these visiting teams. The gratitude was apparently immense.
That says a lot. And even language nuances, like housewife versus ama de casa.
Right, lover of the house. It's subtle, but it offers this little window into how different cultures might value or perceive the same role, a different feeling to it.
Definitely. And the language barriers themselves, mixing up Jiban and Jimon. Sobenham.
Yeah, exactly. A classic, slightly embarrassing mix-up that just highlights the communication hurdles even when everyone means well. And trying to follow a whole church sermon in another language,
Yeah,
that takes real effort.
for sure. These small moments add up. So the notes then seem to pivot towards bigger questions about mission work itself, the real costs involved.
Yes, this is where it gets more reflective. Moving beyond the day-to-day challenges to ask, what does this actually cost? In dedication, time, emotion,
Yeah.
and a crucial one, where should you even go?
That seems vital. Knowing who you're supporting, what their specific needs are.
Absolutely. The notes stress understanding the missionaries on the ground. And if you don't have those direct connections, well, that's where parachurch organizations come in.
Right, those faith-based groups working alongside churches for specific tasks like missions, they can provide structure.
They can. But, as the notes make very clear, even within organized missions, you need discernment.
Ah, okay. This sounds like it leads into some cautionary tales. The contrasting arrivals in Honduras set that up, right? The tough jumble trip versus the warm welcome.
Yeah, it shows the variety. But then you get the story about the missionary in Tegucigalpa. And that's, well, it's troubling.
What happened there? What were the red flags?
Things just didn't add up. A really lavish lifestyle compared to the surroundings, some questionable connections. It just felt off.
So a reminder that you can't just assume everyone involved has pure motives.
Exactly. The author stresses the need to really check people and organizations out. Good intentions aren't a guarantee. There can be real risks, spiritual and even physical, if you're not careful. The bottom line was, not all missionaries are virtuous.
That's a blunt but important lesson, and it contrasts so sharply with the next experience mentioned, Rwanda, during the refugee crisis.
Oh, completely different end of the spectrum. The scale of suffering there?
Yeah.
The notes mention 10,000 deaths daily. It's almost impossible to grasp.
And the team's attitude despite that horror?
Incredible dedication. They were relying heavily on Psalm 91 for protection. The leader apparently said something like, God called us to go. He never said we'd come back alive. Just profound commitment.
Wow. Even getting there sounded rough, stretched out on supply bags in the plane.
Yeah, it just highlights the conditions and their focus on getting help there, no matter the personal discomfort.
That level of commitment is something else. Then there's that little detail about the pilot in eastern Honduras, the
Yeah.
spiral notebook.
Right. It seems small, but him just writing down the team's name in his little notebook, it kind of captures the uncertainty, the reliance on basic things, on faith in really remote places. Sometimes that's all the connection you have.
It paints a picture, and then a completely different kind of challenge, North Korea.
Yeah, talk about a controlled environment.
Yeah.
Constant monitoring, everything scripted, even the church services.
What was wrong with the church services?
They weren't really sermons. They were political speeches. It was all staged. No genuine religious freedom, just intense government control everywhere.
Even the family reunion mention, the siblings, that felt strained.
Completely. Emotional, yes, but happening under this constant watch, it just highlights the huge range of contexts for mission work, some incredibly oppressive.
It really does cover a wide spectrum. And finally, the notes bring us back to Rwanda, specifically the orphans. That sounds incredibly difficult.
Deeply moving and deeply difficult. The term used was unaccompanied children, but that clinical phrase, just, it doesn't capture the sheer scale of the tragedy. Thousands upon thousands of orphans.
And the reality on the ground, collecting bodies daily.
Yes. And the note about taking leftover infants found during that process, taking them to the orphanage, it's just heart-wrenching. Holding one of those babies, knowing their history and uncertain future, the author says it left a lasting, profound impact.
I can only imagine. It's a devastating reality to witness. Okay, so wrapping this all up, we started by asking, are blessings free? After going through all these experiences, the sewage, the broken equipment, the medical crises, the dangers, the emotional toll, what's the verdict from these notes?
Well, the answer seems pretty clear. No, they are definitely not free. There's a huge cost involved. Physical hardship, emotional burnout, logistical headaches, real danger sometimes. It takes immense dedication, time, heart.
It really does. But then, despite acknowledging all of that, all those costs, the author concludes with this incredibly strong statement. Is the cost worthwhile? Of course.
Yeah, it's powerful, isn't it? After detailing all the difficulties, to end with such conviction.
It forces you to think, okay, what makes it worth all that?
Exactly. And I think the underlying message is about the lessons learned, adaptability, resilience, seeing the world differently, maybe understanding cultural nuances better, and the importance of doing it thoughtfully, critically.
It's definitely not simple. It's complex, messy, costly, but ultimately, for this person, worthwhile.
Right. And maybe that's the final thought to leave with you, the listener. Considering everything we've talked about, all the undeniable challenges and costs, what does that final, of course, really mean? What is that value that makes people endure so much?
Right.
Something to ponder.